Hello lovelies, in this video we're going to be looking at your Criminology Level 3 Unit 4 paper that we've written for 2024. So we're going to take you through all the skills that you need, how to interpret the questions, how to lay out your answers to properly show to the examiners everything that you know.
Question 1. This is the scenario that is presented before the start of question 1. All parts of the question could ask you to refer to this scenario in your responses. It's important that you take the time to read this carefully and fully understand the situation. A local town has seen a recent spike in crime which has led to a controversial Safe Town initiative. The campaign advocates giving police more power and giving harsher punishments, including fines and longer prison sentences. Supporters argue for swift action to curb crime, while dissenters fear abuse of civil liberties. Tensions rise in heated debates, polarising the community. Describe the model of criminal justice that is being used by the Safe Town initiative. There are 6 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 5 or 6 marks, knowledge of the model of criminal justice must be clear and evident, and this must be well explained. You should show a good understanding of the model of criminal justice. The answer should have a good structure, and technical language should be used whenever possible. This is a great example of a question that is asking you to use information that is presented in the scenario. It is asking for the model of criminal justice that is being used by the Safe Town initiative outlined in the scenario. It's a good time to revisit the scenario to see which features could be identified and what information you could use in your response. We can see that it says that the campaign advocates for giving police more power and for giving harsher punishments, and it also argues for swift action to be taken to reduce crime. These are all features of a model of criminal justice that you will have learnt about, and this should signpost you and lead you to which model of criminal justice needs to be discussed and described in the response. Even though the question doesn't explicitly ask you to identify the model of criminal justice, you will need to do this in order to go on to describe it. From the features outlined in the scenario, you should know that it is the crime control model of criminal justice that is being used by the Safe Town initiative, and therefore this is the model that needs to be described. Here is the model response. The Safe Town initiative adopts a crime control model of criminal justice, prioritising crime reduction and protecting society above all else. In this model, swift action to minimise criminal activity takes priority, and this is sometimes at the cost of procedural safeguards like due process. It operates on the assumption that accused individuals are guilty, and they will seek guilty pleas so cases can be resolved quickly. The initiative places a strong emphasis on authority, giving the police more power, and offering very limited protection for the individual rights of the accused. It advocates a zero-tolerance policy towards all forms of criminal behaviour, regardless of how severe the crime may be. The Safe Town initiative would want to increase the use of surveillance technologies to monitor and track criminal activity, and would say it is essential for preventing and responding to criminal incidents. It wants to administer harsh penalties with the hope that it will deter criminal behaviour and protect members of the public. This shows that it is most concerned with the rights of society and victims. The response effectively identifies the crime control model as the framework used by the Safe Town initiative, providing a clear understanding of the approach being taken. After reading and understanding the scenario, this would have been the first decision that would need to have been made. Which model was the initiative using? This is a clear example of having to use and apply knowledge rather than just being able to recall knowledge of the models. It would be useful to consider an alternative campaign that used the due process model, and this would help you prepare for alternative questions. You would recognise straight away which model was being used. The key to the response's success is its application of knowledge to the model. It successfully combines knowledge of the crime control model with its application to the specific context of the Safe Town initiative. For instance, it highlights the prioritisation of crime reduction and societal protection, aligning with the initiative's focus on giving police more power and imposing harsher punishments. So it combines the knowledge of the model with the action that is being taken and information learned from the scenario. Another example is how the response outlines the assumption of guilt and the emphasis on guilty pleas for quick resolutions, reflecting the initiative's push for swift action at the expense of due process. The use of technical language such as zero tolerance policy, surveillance technologies and harsh penalties enhance the clarity of the answer and contribute towards it achieving in the top mark band. Briefly describe control theory as an explanation of why people obey the law. There are 4 marks available for the question. The mark scheme that you can see here states that to achieving the top mark band, knowledge of control theory should be clear and this should be well explained. So any features of control theory that are presented should be well defined and details should be given. The answer should be cohesive, it should have a clear structure, and technical language associated with control theory should be used whenever possible. Control theory could be a large section of the specification, and you may have extensive knowledge of this theory. But do note that this question is asking you to briefly describe, so an overview of the theory was absolutely fine. Note, in the second part of the question, it is asking you to use this to explain why people obey the law. This is not asking for why people commit crime, but instead why people are law-abiding citizens. This must be the key focus throughout the response. Here is the model response. Control theory says that people obey the law because of the presence of social bonds and attachments. These social controls, as outlined by Hidesy, include attachment, commitment, involvement, and beliefs. Strong social bonds, such as family ties and community connections, decrease the likelihood of deviant and criminal behaviour and encourage people to behave in line with societal norms and laws. Individuals weigh up the potential consequences of breaking the law against the benefits of conformity and consider what would be lost if they broke these bonds. The response effectively explains control theory as an explanation of why people obey the law. This, as we said, needs to be the focus. Why are people law-abiding and not why people commit crime? It accurately highlights the elements of control theory, including the influence of social bonds and attachments on behaviour. It provides detail by including reference to what the 4 types of social bonds are and references Hidesy's framework of social control. This adds credibility to the explanation. The response goes on and extends this point again, talking about the role of strong social bonds such as family ties and community connections in promoting law-abiding behaviour. This level of explanation and the inclusion of these examples supports its mark in the top mark band. Assess how fines meet the aims of punishment. There are 6 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 5 or 6 marks, knowledge of how fines do contribute towards the aims of punishment must be evident and well explained. So there should be good subject knowledge and details should be given. There should be a clear structure to the response and technical language should be used whenever possible. Note that this is an assess question, so you really need to come to a decision about whether fines are effective and whether fines do indeed contribute towards the aims of punishment. And there needs to be an assessment, a weighing up of this. You should therefore consider the strengths and limitations of fines and whether they do meet the aims of punishment and consider any problems that might occur. You should also note at this stage which aims of punishment fines do contribute towards. Remember that there are 5 aims of punishment named in the specification that you can select from at this stage: retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence, public protection, and reparation. For a 6-mark question like this, it would be appropriate to select 2 aims of punishment and assess how far fines meet those 2 aims. Here is the model response. Fines impose a financial burden on individuals because of criminal behaviour and act as a form of retribution. They make offenders suffer a proportional financial consequence for their actions. Fines are tailored to the type of offence, circumstances, and the offender's ability to pay, ensuring a degree of fairness in punishment. Fines can also be a deterrent, hoping to dissuade individuals from engaging in criminal behaviour due to the prospect of financial loss. If fines are unpaid, it can lead to imprisonment or the seizing of property, further reinforcing the punitive nature of fines. However, the effectiveness of this is dependent on the person's belief about the likelihood of getting caught and their ability to pay. If someone thinks that there is little chance of getting caught, even the possibility of a large fine may not be enough to deter behaviour. However, there is a significant number of fines that never get paid and eventually get written off. This shows their limitation in achieving the aims of punishment. The response offers a comprehensive assessment of how fines meet the aims of punishment. It effectively highlights fines as a means of retribution and clearly identifies this as an aim of punishment. It explains how fines could be a form of retribution, that they are proportional financial consequences for criminal actions. It also acknowledges the importance of tailoring fines to the type of offence and the offender's circumstances to ensure fairness. This provides additional detail and understanding and has clearly extended the point being made. It then goes on to discuss fines as a deterrent, considering individuals' perceptions of the likelihood of getting caught and their ability to pay. The mention of enforcement measures like imprisonment or property seizure adds depth to the discussion and acknowledges how fines will deter people. What will people be avoiding? Again, this extension of the response is necessary to reach the top mark band. It wouldn't be enough to simply say that it was a form of deterrence, explain how and why this is the case. Finally, the acknowledgement of the limitations, such as the significant number of unpaid fines, demonstrates a critical assessment of the effectiveness of fines in achieving punishment goals and ensures that an assessment has taken place. Technical language has been used throughout the response, the aims of punishment, retribution, deterrence, offences, offenders, imprisonment. This adds to the overall quality of the response and supports the answer gaining a mark in the top band. Evaluate the effectiveness of prisons in achieving social control. There are 9 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says here that to achieve between 7 and 9 marks and to achieve in the top mark band, knowledge of the effectiveness of prisons should be evident and well explained. The answer should have a clear, cohesive structure, and technical language should be used throughout the response and always in an appropriate and accurate way. This question is asking you to evaluate, so there needs to be a consideration of both the strengths and limitations of how prisons will achieve social control. This is really asking you to explain how well prisons can achieve and do achieve social control. Are they effective or not? Note that in an evaluation question, there doesn't need to be the presentation of an equal number of strengths and limitations. You may have more strengths or more limitations, and that is absolutely fine. You just need to make sure that both have been presented in some way. Let's take a look at this model response. Prisons can be effective in achieving social control as they serve as a deterrent by threatening the loss of freedom, discouraging individuals from engaging in criminal behaviour, and physically removing offenders from society. This is a direct control of their behaviour as they shouldn't be able to commit further crime whilst they are in prison. However, their effectiveness is compromised by issues such as overcrowding, which leads to cramped living conditions. This can prevent rehabilitation efforts and can increase tension between inmates. In 2021, the prison population in England and Wales exceeded the design capacity, and this will only add to the pressures placed on prisons. With large amounts of people in prison, controlling behaviour will become even more challenging. Staffing issues also mean that there will be less control in prisons. It was recorded that over 15% of prison officers left their jobs in 2022, and this has led to a lack of experienced officers to manage behaviour. Prisons may struggle with rehabilitation, and this will contribute towards high rates of recidivism. The reoffending rate in the UK is around 64% within 1 year of release, indicating the failure to effectively address the root causes of crime and not gain social control. Reports indicate substantial drug use in UK prisons, with around 13.6% of inmates testing positive for drugs in random tests. This again shows how behaviour within prisons is not being controlled and its ineffectiveness at preparing individuals for successful release. Incidents of violence in UK prisons reached a high of 33,362 in 2020, highlighting challenges in maintaining a secure and safe environment. This could be due to low staffing levels or policies that do not lead to social control. People are continuing to commit deviant and criminal acts even when they are in prison. This is a good response to the question, as it gives a full and thorough evaluation of the effectiveness of prisons. The answer is also linked to social control throughout. Links are made at every opportunity to link the information and evidence being given back to social control. The answer starts by looking at the strengths of prisons and how they are effective at achieving social control. It points out that people cannot or shouldn't be able to commit more crime when they are in prison. The behaviour is controlled. It shows a clear understanding of the role of prisons and what they hope to achieve: loss of freedom, preventing criminal behaviour, and removing offenders from society. The rest of the response then considers the limitations of prisons and how they are often ineffective at achieving social control. As we said before, the fact that the evaluation is not equal, there isn't the same number of strengths and limitations, is absolutely fine, because both have been provided. Balance is present in the response. The answer uses data and evidence really well, and this strengthens the arguments that have been made. Looking at the reduction in staffing levels, the amount of violent behaviour that takes place, and the amount of drug behaviour that takes place in prisons, as well as levels of reoffending, shows a real depth of knowledge on the topic. These pieces are then explored further and clear links to social control are made. Technical language is used accurately and consistently throughout. Terms such as rehabilitation, recidivism, prison capacity are all used accurately. This further adds to the quality of the response and helps secure a mark in the top mark band. Question 2. This is the scenario that is presented before the start of question 2. Remember that all parts of the question could ask you to refer to this scenario in your responses. It is therefore important, as always, to thoroughly read through the situation and understand the complexities of it. An individual who was sentenced to 6 years for grievous bodily harm is close to release with partially successful rehabilitation. While therapy and skill acquisition have helped them a lot, underlying issues persist. Their commitment to change is evident, but they sometimes struggle with interacting with other people. Continued support post-release remains crucial. Identify the 3 types of criminal offence. There are 3 marks available for the question. Because this is an identify question, statements and phrases will be sufficient. There is no need to provide full statements or sentences. Simply stating the 3 types of criminal offence will be enough. 1 mark will be awarded for each of the 3 types. There are only 3 possible answers to this question. It is just a matter of recalling your knowledge. Indictable offences, summary offences, and triable either way offences. You should recognise this question as testing knowledge from Unit 3. Don't forget that the exam paper is synoptic and can do this. It is usually shorter questions, just like this one, that set the scene for later questions. But don't ignore the fact that Unit 3 material can appear, and please don't be surprised if questions like this come up. Be prepared. Briefly describe the stages of the trial process. There are 4 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 3 or 4 marks, knowledge of the stages of a trial process should be evident and well explained. So subject knowledge needs to be accurate and points need to be detailed. The answer should have a clear structure and be cohesive, and technical language should be used throughout and always in an appropriate and accurate way. Because this question is asking you to briefly describe, there is an understanding that a huge amount of detail will not be explored. This is not appropriate for a 4-mark question. However, you are being asked to give an overview of the stages of the trial process. Regarding the stages of a trial, you should consider what happens before, during and after, and this will provide you with a clear structure to pull together your response. Let's take a look at this model answer. Before a trial, investigations by the police take place, and then formal charges can be made. Evidence is gathered and the case can be prepared. A defendant may be granted bail, allowing release before trial under certain conditions. Decisions on bail are based on factors like flight risk and danger to the community. The prosecution presents the case against the defendant. The defence challenges the prosecution's case and presents evidence in favour of the accused. A judge oversees proceedings, ensuring fairness and adherence to the law. Defendants sometimes enter plea bargains during the pre-trial phase to simplify proceedings. The types of plea include making changes to the charge, count and sentence, although these are not used that often within the UK. Magistrates' courts handle less severe offences and initial hearings. Crown Court deals with more serious crimes and conduct trials. Defendants or prosecutors can appeal verdicts or sentences. Appeals are typically heard in higher courts, providing a review of legal errors or unfairness in the trial process. The response offers a really clear and concise overview of the stages of the trial process, addressing key aspects such as investigation, formal charges, bail decisions, the role of the prosecution in the defence, and the role of the judge. It outlines the sequence of events in a logical manner, providing a structured understanding of how trials proceed from initial investigations to final appeals. The response effectively highlights the inclusion of plea bargains, the distinction between magistrates' courts and Crown Courts, and the option for appeals, enhancing the comprehensiveness of the response. Overall, it offers a comprehensive overview, making it a strong response to the question. It is clear that there is an understanding of the trial process. The answer doesn't fully extend on any of the points, but this is absolutely fine for a briefly described question like this with 4 marks available. This is a question that you could spend a lot more time on, but always be mindful of the demands of the question. No further depth is required here. Identify one aim or objective of the probation service. There is just 1 mark available for the question. Because this is an identify question, a brief statement or phrase will be enough in order to secure the mark. You should note though that answers are limited here, and the aim must clearly capture the aim of the probation service. A common error here is making a generic statement that could be true of a number of different organisations. You must include information that only applies to the probation service. Similarly, if you've got a question like this that was asking you about another organisation, you must make it specifically about them. You would not gain a mark for a generic response. That would not necessarily show that you had a knowledge of the probation service, but instead just general knowledge that you were attempting to apply. Be very specific. A model answer presented that would gain the mark would be that the aim of the probation service is to support the rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders into society. An alternative answer could be that they ensure the safety of the public by managing and monitoring the behaviour of individuals on probation to prevent reoffending. Describe the working practices of the probation service that will support people like the individual in the scenario. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve 3 or 4 marks, and so to achieve in the top mark band, knowledge of the working practices of the probation service should be evident, so they should be clear throughout the response and should be well explained. There should be a clear structure, making the response cohesive, and technical language should be used in an appropriate way. The question is a described question, so it wants a description and outline of what the probation service actually do. What are they doing on a day-to-day basis that will provide support for individuals like the one in the scenario? If you revisit that information, we know that this person has been going through a rehabilitation programme which has been partially successful, but they are still in need of some development, especially around their communication skills. For a 4-mark question like this, identifying 2 things, providing 2 examples of what the probation service do would be enough to achieve the full 4 marks, as long as both of these examples were clearly identified and both were linked and explored in direct context to the probation service and the individual from the scenario. Let's take a look at this model response. The probation service work with individuals who have committed a wide range of offences. It is not limited to certain types of crime. These can involve non-violent behaviour and crimes like GBH committed by the person in the scenario, and also the most serious crimes like murder. The probation service will also work with all types of offenders. They will manage individuals on probation, including those sentenced for the first time and those with a history of offences. They will design interventions to address specific rehabilitation needs, such as improving communication skills. This response is good because it clearly identifies 2 ways that the probation service work to support individuals. Good knowledge is evident and it is clearly communicated. Presenting information in 2 separate paragraphs helps to show where different points have been made. Always start a new paragraph when you are starting a new point or presenting a new idea. 2 working practices have been included here, 1 in each paragraph, and this is sufficient for a 4-mark question like this. In the first paragraph, it outlines the offences that are covered by the probation service, and it gives examples of a range of crimes that are covered by their work. Including these specific examples adds detail to the response. Note that the responses also reference the crime that was committed by the individual in the scenario. This shows that this is being considered and understood. The second point refers to the type of offenders that the service works with, and again it gives examples of this, first-time offenders and those with a history of crime. Providing these examples helps to extend the response and give the detail needed to achieve in the top mark band. Technical language has been used throughout, terms such as non-violent and rehabilitation. Use this specialist language whenever you can. Always consider whether there is a more technical term that could be used. Briefly explain how national policies can be a limitation in achieving social control. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see here from the mark scheme that to achieve between 3 and 4 marks, so to achieve in the top mark band, knowledge of how national policies can be limitations to social control must be evident and well explained, so subject knowledge should be accurate and detailed wherever possible. There should be a clear structure to the response, and technical language should be used throughout and always in an appropriate and accurate way. Note that the question asks for a brief explanation, and so there is the recognition that this response will not be extensive and will not be as detailed as more extended answers. Note that the question is also looking for limitations, so it is looking at the problems that can occur when trying to apply national policies and how this can lead to problems in achieving social control. No marks would be awarded for presenting the strengths and the successes of national policies and the positive contributions that they have made to achieving social control. For a 4-mark question like this, it would be appropriate to give 2 limitations or to give 2 reasons why national policies have been a barrier to social control. Let's take a look at this model response. National policies will take a one-size-fits-all approach. The same policy will be applied in all areas of the country. This may not address local variations in crime and community needs. What is a problem in one area may not be something that needs tackling in another. Another problem is that when a new crime policy is introduced, it may lead to a focus on a specific offence. This can potentially cause neglect or under-prioritisation of other criminal activities not explicitly targeted by the policy, and these then go unaddressed. The response is a very clear outline of how national policy can potentially be a barrier to social control. 2 paragraphs have been included, and each give a different reason. This gives a good structure to the response and makes it very easy to see where knowledge has been presented and where marks can be awarded. As we said before, 2 reasons are appropriate for a brief explain question with 4 marks available. 1 reason presented in each of the paragraphs. In the first paragraph, you can see that a clear limitation has been identified, that national policies take a one-size-fits-all approach. The second sentence then goes on to explain why this is a limitation and the problems that it can cause for local communities. This extension, providing the why, is what allows the answer to reach the top mark band. We can see that this is done consistently throughout the response, and the same structure is used in the second paragraph. The second paragraph starts by identifying another limitation, that when new national policy is introduced, it causes attention to be paid to a certain specific crime. This is then explained and extended further. It explains how other crimes can then go undetected. And again, this extension and this elaboration of the point is what is needed to secure the highest marks. Technical language is used throughout the response, terms such as local variation, community needs under prioritisation. These all improve the overall quality of the response.
Describe the relationship between the police, the probation service and the courts. There are 9 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve between 7 and 9 marks, and so to achieve in the top mark band, knowledge should be evident and well explained. So there needs to be a clear understanding of how the police, the probation service and the courts will work together. The answer should have a clear structure and technical language should be used whenever possible. This is a described question, so you need to include information about what the police, the probation service and the courts do. What is their role on a day-to-day basis? How do they contribute towards the criminal justice system? The other key element of the question to be aware of is that you are being asked to describe the relationship between these 3 organisations. It is therefore not enough to have 3 paragraphs simply describing the role of each of the organisations. You must identify ways in which that they interact with each other and support each other. Without this, marks will be severely restricted. Here is a model response. The police are responsible for investigating crimes, making arrests, and gathering evidence, which provides the initial information relied upon by the courts. Without the collection of evidence by the police, the courts would not be able to carry out their role successfully. The police will be aware of the type and amount of evidence that would be needed in court to allow a trial to take place, and for the court to be able to make an informed decision. Prosecutors present cases in court, while the judiciary ensures fair trials and ultimately makes decisions on guilt or innocence and determines sentencing. The evidence collected by the police will be used to help these decisions be made. The courts will want to receive information from probation officers to help them make decisions too. This will provide more context and allow fair decisions to be made. Probation officers play a crucial role both pre- and post-sentencing, assessing offenders, providing these reports to courts, and recommending suitable sentences based on offenders' risks to the public. Post-sentencing, probation officers monitor and support offenders in the community, collaborating with courts to ensure compliance and exchanging information regularly. Additionally, the probation service liaises with prisons when offenders are about to be released, ensuring a coordinated approach to offender management and rehabilitation throughout the criminal justice system. This is with the aim of preventing reoffending and the individual having to appear in court again. Overall, the relationship between these 3 organisations is collaborative and interdependent. The police gather evidence and make arrests, the courts adjudicate cases and impose sentences, and the probation service provides supervision and support to offenders post-conviction. Effective communication and coordination by these agencies is essential for the smooth functioning of the criminal justice system and for achieving its goals of maintaining public safety, achieving social control and promoting rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders. This response provides a comprehensive overview of the relationship between the police, the probation service and the courts, and it does achieve in the top mark band. The response effectively outlines the primary responsibilities of each of the organisations. The police are responsible for investigating crimes and gathering evidence, which is crucial for the court's functioning.
Prosecutors present cases and the judiciary ensures fair trials and decides guilt, innocence and sentencing. Probation officers assess offenders, provide reports to the courts, recommend sentences and will monitor the offenders post-sentencing. All this information shows a good and secure understanding of the role of these three organisations. But the response does go beyond this and beyond these descriptions and does identify how these organisations work together. It highlights the flow of information from the police to the courts and it emphasises the importance of probation officers' reports in supporting court decisions. It also mentions the communication between the probation service and prisons to ensure a coordinated approach to offender management, and this shows a really holistic view of the criminal justice process. Technical language is used throughout the response. Terms such as prosecutors, judiciary, offenders, and these all add precision and clarity to the answer. It demonstrates a good understanding of the criminal justice system and really enhances the quality of the analysis. So overall, the response effectively addresses the roles of the police, the probation service and the courts. It looks at how they are collaborative. It extends these ideas to explain the importance of their collaboration, and it uses technical language with ease. Question 3. This is the scenario that is presented in the exam paper at the start of question 3. Remember that all parts of the question could ask you to refer to the scenario in your responses, so do spend the time to thoroughly understand the situation. An innovative training programme has been introduced in a prison. Tailored to individual needs, it offers vocational training, cognitive therapy and mentorship. Prisoners partake in workshops, mastering skills from carpentry to digital literacy. Expert counsellors guide personal development. Discuss the aims of punishment met by the training programme. There are 6 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 5 or 6 marks, knowledge of how the training programme meets aims of punishment should be clear and well explained. So make sure all points that are given are extended and elaborated on in some way. The answer should be cohesive, there should be a clear structure, and technical language should be used whenever possible. Firstly, revisit the scenario and remind yourself about what the training programme was hoping to achieve. There were 2 main things. Supporting individuals to gain new skills, such as in carpentry and digital literacy, and then receiving mentorship to support their more personal development. You should also take a moment to think about the aims of punishment and you remind yourself of these: retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence, public protection and reparation. And take a moment to think which of these aims would the training programme be most aligned with. For a 6-mark question like this, it would be appropriate to select 2 of those aims of punishment and explain how the training programme goes towards meeting them. Here is the model response. One aim of the programme could be rehabilitation. The vocational training will help to prepare individuals for their release from prison. They will be developing knowledge and skills that will help them gain employment and earn money. This will help reduce the likelihood of reoffending. The mentorship provides more personal support and will hopefully guide prisoners towards positive behavioural changes. They will have the opportunity to talk about concerns with someone and address any worries they may have. Someone will be able to give them advice on how to make positive changes and prepare for successful release. Reparation could be another aim of the training programme. The vocational training and skill workshops contribute to the development of practical abilities. This could give someone a sense of responsibility and encourage them to make contributions to wider society. By acquiring skills like carpentry and digital literacy, prisoners can potentially make reparations by utilising their talents to support others through employment or volunteering opportunities. This answer is a really strong response to the question. Firstly, it is focused on the prison's intervention programme throughout. It is clear that the scenario has been understood and it is used really effectively. There is clear reference to the vocational training, This is used in both of the paragraph and also to the mentoring sessions that are being provided. Each paragraph addresses a different aim. The first looking at rehabilitation and then the second looking at reparation. This shows good subject knowledge and clear use of technical language. In the first paragraph, looking at rehabilitation, it explains how the skills gained during the programme will support the development of the individual and reduce the chance of reoffending. This is clearly in line with the aim of rehabilitation. It gives specific examples of how it will help. It doesn't just say it will make things easier. It explains that it will help someone to gain employment and to earn money in the future. This is very specific. Be this specific. Explain exactly how it will meet the aim. In the second paragraph that's looking at reparation, again it explains exactly how the programme will help to meet this aim. It gives the specific example of someone being able to use their skills and knowledge to support others in the wider community. And again, the knowledge is explicitly linked to the training programme and the courses that were available. Overall, we see good knowledge of two aims of punishment, rehabilitation and reparation. And this knowledge is clearly applied to the scenario and the training programme explained. There is a very clear structure to the response, two separate paragraphs, each addressing a different aim of punishment, and technical language has been used well throughout. Describe judicial processes of lawmaking. There are 6 marks available for the question. The answer says that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 5 or 6 marks, knowledge of judicial processes of lawmaking should be evident, so subject knowledge needs to be really clear, and this should be well explained. Note that this is a 6-mark question, so a level of detail and extension of ideas will be required. The answer should be cohesive, there should be a clear structure, and technical language should be used throughout the response and always in an appropriate and accurate way. Note from the question that this is specifically asking for judicial processes of lawmaking. It is not looking for government processes. No marks would be awarded for presenting information on government lawmaking processes. So you recall your knowledge of judicial processes of lawmaking, and you should note that these include judicial precedent and statutory interpretation. These are the 2 main pieces of knowledge that will need to be included in the response, and both of them should be clearly described. Here is the model response. Using judicial precedent, courts adhere to the principle of stare decisis, whereby decisions from higher courts establish binding precedents for lower courts. This ensures consistency in legal interpretation as past decisions guide current and future rulings. Within this framework, a hierarchy of precedents exists, where decisions from higher courts carry more authority and must be followed by lower courts. In statutory interpretation, courts rely on the literal meaning of the words used in legislation. The plain and ordinary meaning of the language serves as the primary consideration. However, courts also consider legislative intent, examine the purpose and objectives of lawmakers behind the statutes. This involves scrutinising legislative history, context and objectives to understand the intended meaning, and this adds depth to statutory interpretation. Judges can use discretion when interpreting statutes, particularly in cases where the language is ambiguous or unclear. Judges balance the literal interpretation with legislative intent, considering the broader legal context. This flexibility allows for appropriate interpretations of statutes, ensuring that the law adapts to evolving societal needs and circumstances. The response provided effectively addresses the question on the judicial processes of lawmaking. Strong subject knowledge is evident throughout. The response demonstrates a good understanding of the judicial processes involved in lawmaking, and it covers key aspects such as judicial precedent and statutory interpretation. And it does finish with a small section on judges being able to use their discretion. The explanation of stare decisis, the hierarchy of precedents and the factors influencing statutory interpretation, displays a solid grasp of the subject matter. The use of technical language throughout the response is appropriate and demonstrates again a good command of legal terminology. The terms such as stare decisis, statutory interpretation, legislative intent and discretion are used accurately and effectively and really does enhance the clarity and precision of the explanation. This language choice reflects the ability and familiarity that an individual has with the subject content. The response is really well structured, with each paragraph focusing on a specific aspect of judicial lawmaking. The first paragraph introduces the concept of judicial precedent, followed by a paragraph on statutory interpretation, and finally with that closing comment on judges using their discretion. This clear organisation helps to present the information in a really logical and cohesive way and makes it really easy to follow the argument and to understand the key points that are being made. Overall, the response provides a thorough and insightful description of the processes of lawmaking and demonstrates really strong subject knowledge. There is effective use of technical language and the response is really well structured. It effectively addresses the requirements of the question and would achieve a mark in the top mark band. Explain the difference between internal and external forms of social control. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve the full 4 marks and to achieve in the top mark band, knowledge of internal and external forms of social control must be evident and they must be well explained. The answer should have a clear structure and be cohesive, and technical language should be used whenever possible. The key thing to note from the question is that it is looking for the difference between the 2 key terms, so you must provide some sort of comparison at some stage. We know from the mark scheme that clear knowledge of the definitions should be given, and to make this well explained, it would be appropriate to include examples of both internal and external forms of social control. Here is the model response. Internal forms of social control involve individuals regulating their own behaviour based on internalised values, morals and ethical standards. These could emerge from their upbringing, socialisation, traditions and culture. For example, someone's culture may feel it important to be married before having sex. They have internalised this view and so decide to behave in line with this belief. External forms of control are instead controls that are exerted by external entities, not the individuals themselves, such as laws and authority figures. This could include the police and law enforcement. A person will not drive over the speed limit because they know that they could receive punishment in terms of a fine or points on their licence for doing this. This response effectively addresses the question by providing a clear and concise explanation of the difference between internal and external forms of social control. The structure of the answer, with separate paragraphs dedicated to each form, enhances the response's clarity and organisation. The response demonstrates good knowledge by providing examples to illustrate each type of social control. For internal forms, it mentions individuals regulating their behaviour based on internalised values and cultural norms, using the example of sex before marriage. For external forms, it discusses controls exerted by external entities, such as laws and authority figures, using the example of speed limits and potential punishment by law enforcement to illustrate external social control mechanisms. Additionally, the response effectively compares the 2 forms of social control by highlighting the distinction between individual self-regulation and control by external authorities. This comparison helps to clarify the differences between internal and external social control, fulfilling the requirements of the question. The technical language used in the response is appropriate for the topic. Terms such as internalised values, authority figures, and law enforcement are examples of this technical language, which enhance the precision and accuracy of the explanation. Overall, the response provides a good understanding of the topic with clear structure, relevant examples, an effective comparison, and an appropriate use of technical language, making it a good response to the question. Discuss the contribution of behavioural tactics to achieving social control. There are 9 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve between 7 and 9 marks, knowledge of behavioural tactics should be evident and well explained. So your knowledge of these tactics needs to be secure and a level of detail needs to be given. The answer should have a clear structure and be cohesive, and technical language associated with behavioural tactics needs to be used whenever possible. And you should make sure that you do this in an accurate and an appropriate way. Because this is a discuss question, you firstly need to show your knowledge of the behavioural tactics, but you then also need to consider the strengths and limitations of these tactics as well. So you need to consider whether they are effective. Do the behavioural tactics help to achieve social control? The question is asking for behavioural tactics, and so more than one is needed. 2 is enough, as long as these are done in a detailed way and discussed and evaluated in depth. Here is the model response. Criminal behaviour orders replaced as BOs and aim to deter individuals from engaging in behaviours that violate the order. They are issued after a criminal conviction for behaviour which has caused harm, alarm or distress. They can restrict someone from carrying out specific behaviours, from going to certain locations or associating with certain people. If the order is breached, then this can lead to prosecution or imprisonment. These will help to protect communities from further criminal activities by the offender by severely limiting the opportunity they have to commit crime. They are also effective because they can provide wide-ranging restrictions based on the individual nature of the criminal behaviour. This really helps to reduce offending. However, there are concerns over potential abuse. The orders can sometimes be overly restrictive, and this can impact on individual rights. Token economies can also be used to achieve social control, and these are often used in prisons. These are based on operant conditioning principles, where desired behaviours are reinforced through tokened rewards to encourage positive conduct. Inmates earn tokens by adhering to rules, participating in rehabilitation programmes, or displaying positive behaviours. Tokens can then be exchanged for privileges, such as additional visitation rights or access to certain amenities. These foster a culture of positive reinforcement, and token economies contribute to maintaining social control. Token economies are very effective. Hobbs and Holt carried out research with teenage boys in a US correctional institution, and the impact of token economy measured over a 14-month period. Results showed an increase in appropriate behaviours and no noticeable improvement for the control group. However, token allocation may be subjective, leading to potential biases or abuse of power by prison staff. They may decide to award tokens inconsistently, which will cause problems for the system. Inmates will then lose confidence in the system, and this will reduce motivation and the amount of control it offers. While effective in the prison setting, token economies may have limited impact on long-term behaviour change and reducing recidivism. The same amount of direct and immediate reward will not be available once they have left prison, and they may struggle to maintain their positive behaviours away from the prison setting. The response effectively addresses the question by discussing 2 behavioural tactics used in achieving social control: criminal behaviour orders, CBOs, and then token economies. And this meets the demand of the question for more than one behavioural tactic. The response uses a very, very clear structure. For each tactic, it firstly outlines and gives a clear explanation of its purpose and how it contributes towards social control. It then goes on to consider the strengths and the limitations, so to evaluate that tactic. These same small steps are then repeated for the second tactic, the description, and then the strengths and the limitations. For criminal behaviour orders, we can see that the response explains that these orders aim to deter individuals from engaging in harmful behaviours, and it outlines the consequences of breaching the order. We can see here that it gives very specific examples of what can happen. Somebody could be prosecuted in some way, or it could lead to that person going to prison. As we said, we see this same description element for token economies. The response describes how the system reinforces positive behaviours through rewards and providing inmates with tokens when positive behaviours is being shown. It goes on to then link it to social control by explaining how this brings about a culture of compliance and contributes towards social control within prison environments. As we said, once the description has taken place, an evaluation is then given, and this includes strengths and limitations for each of the behavioural tactics. This is really focused on the effectiveness and the appropriateness of these measures being used. We can see for criminal behaviour orders, the answer acknowledges their effectiveness in reducing offending and providing these tailored individual restrictions based on an individual's crime and behaviour. It does offer a limitation by highlighting concerns over potential abuse and infringements of individual rights just due to how restrictive the orders can be. For token economies, again, their effectiveness is considered, and here the answer includes and cites research evidence in the form of Hobbs and Holt and their work in the US. This gives a level of detail and understanding that really does help to secure a mark in the top mark. Whilst acknowledging their effectiveness, it also does point out the potential for biases and potential issues, such as the subjective nature of token allocation and its problems with bringing about long-term change for individuals. Technical language has been used throughout the response, and this adds another level of quality. Terms such as criminal behaviour orders, operant conditioning, token economies are all examples of this language, and it does really demonstrate a real understanding of the subject and contributes to the coherence of the response. So overall, the response provides a really comprehensive discussion, so a description and evaluation of the contribution of behavioural tactics to achieving social control. Clear explanations, thoughtful evaluations with strengths and limitations, and appropriate use of technical language, and this makes it a really strong response to the question.
Ouch! This is why in some videos I'll explain scratches.